Okay, good morning, our lovely friends, readers, and listeners. I'm Aldona Grupas, and I'm very happy introduce today pastor, poet, author, essayist, theologist, author, David William Parry. He has written two collections of poetry as well as a collection of essays. David is an international speaker and author of over 60 publications and 3 books. I hope I'm right. Good morning, dear David.
Good morning, my dear friend Aldona. It's a great honor to be speaking with you this morning. Actually, I've got 70 publications.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I say that because, of course, a lot of them are linked in with Central Asia, not so much your own wonderful country, but we'll work on that. But of course, as part of the Eurasian Creative Guild, a lot of my work was with Lithuania, the Central Asian states, and so on. So a fair percentage is to do with that region, those countries, because they're a passion of mine. So it wasn't just a pleasure talking to an old friend like you this morning. It's an honor to be talking about types of literature which people really do need to know on a wider basis.
David, thank you very much, and for your introduction. If you could introduce yourself a little bit more, what on the surface you have a stable and very British background, I know. With this in mind, would you like to tell our listeners something about your own past alongside those events that started you writing poetry? I love to listen your poems.
The magic of two old friends talking is that nothing can go wrong. Nothing. It's just a lovely, good old chinwag, as they used to say where I grew up. I grew up in Hampshire. Gosh, where do I start? As Thomas Hardy said, I think it was one of his characters in The Mayor of Casterbridge, I'm just a humble preacher man. I suppose I've done although I've done a few extra things, I think. I have Welsh in my background. I don't identify as entirely Welsh because there's also a bit of German. Oh my God, there's a bit of Italian. My family was quite mixed, so I was quite, I'm used to different types of people with different backgrounds, different histories, different legacies, and also different classes. I mean, I'm a working class boy and very proud of it, but some members of the family were from the social elite. So, I had one of those strange backgrounds where you get to meet all sorts of different people in their own worlds. And it became very important to me. I remember, I'll take a step forward, then a step back. I remember my aunt, she was very, very posh, maternal aunt, and had this huge house, this mansion in the countryside, and the whole of my little poor part of the family would spend Christmas with her in this mansion and my uncle for many years. I remember, walking down this huge wooden staircase every Christmas morning, and there were Christmas trees everywhere in every room. And there'd be a pile of presents. And it wasn't like nowadays where, it had to be expensive things, because that wasn't the idea. The idea was, are you showing your love to your family, which is something going missing nowadays? My God, where will things end? And sometimes they were ridiculous presents, like there'd be a huge puppet that had been wrapped up with a bow, and what am I going to do with that? But it's amazing, and a book, and an orange, and a piece of cake, and it was just magical. So I've always been used to meeting different types of people in their own worlds, and that's very important to me. I actually was born in Portsmouth in Hampshire, at St Mary's, the hospital. so I've known medical people. That's a weird one too. Like you, young lady. They've always been at the back of my world experience, which is why I've got such a huge respect for doctors, for nurses, the hours they work. Oh my God, it's even worse than being a priest. Yeah, working working all day every day. No thanks. Maybe sometimes, maybe not. Nobody thanks you properly. And you just think, well, I'm doing it because it's good work. I'm doing it because it's me. I'm doing it because it needs to be done. So I've always admired professionals in the medical careers, professionals with medical careers, always admired that. I moved to London, to bounce the story forward, in the early 1980s, which seems like another world now, since we're talking about different worlds. Britain was very different then. It was I think, a much better place than it is now. And it was quite a shock. In those days, if you were poor like myself and you wanted any type of future, you had to go to London. You had to go to the magic, the Emerald City, and see if your dreams would come true. For me, it sort of worked. I mean, I moved there in 82, 83. Can't quite remember because, moving is a process. It's not always a clear, I'm now in a van driving to a new location. Sometimes it's a bit messier than that. Loved London in those days. I hate it now. Hate it now. It was clean. It was something. It was pretty, and people weren't nasty. Nowadays, it's dirty, unpleasant. Everyone's rude. If they really think becoming like New York is an advance, I can promise them it's not. I wouldn't live there anymore. I'm 40 years, Aldona, 40 years in London. No more, that's enough. But as I say, with the class structure of this country, the poison of the United Kingdom, the class structure really meant you had to move there if you wanted to do anything. If I hadn't moved there, I certainly wouldn't have met wonderful people like yourself. I wouldn't have met all of my friends across the Eurasian countries, and certainly not my beloved Central Asia. I've loved Russian culture. I've loved, you're not meant to say that at the minute, but I do. I love Russian culture. I love Central Asian cultures. They're exotic, they're rich, they're powerful. And it leads me to answering your final question. They are some of the reasons I started writing poetry. When I was a boy, I started writing poetry. It wasn't real poetry, sentences. If you're a boy, if you're a girl, you don't write real poetry. You think it's poetry, but it's not poetry. And I remember I was about 6, 7, I started doing it. And I remember dreaming of places like Samarkand. I remember dreaming of places like Baku. I remember dreaming of places like sort of cold and snow-driven Moscow, and thinking, oh, what would it be like to go there? My poetry, like most of my work when it's not to do with Central Asia, is actually postmodern. Weirdly, I'm a postmodernist. But it started with fairy tales, it started with myths, it started with legends, and a lot of those were from that part of the world. Lithuania, I mean, they conquered the Vikings at one point. My heavens, there's a claim. Countries towards the east of Europe and beyond, which still capture my imagination. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much, David. Yeah.
Well, I've got a question for you. Because I thought the idea of today, because it's not a long show, but it's a very good show, and congratulations to you for getting this show together. I hope you invite me back soon.
Yes.
I'm an old preacher, so I have to look at what I wrote down with this. So, Miss Aldona, right? You have a diverse background, and you're a nurse. My God, a nurse who writes, isn't that's magical? That's magical. And I know, I mean, you've moved between different countries. I've explored different countries, but I haven't moved between different countries. You've done that. You've seen the cultures, you've seen the peoples, and I think you draw on those experiences in your writing. How about you? You threw the ball at me, I'll throw the ball back at you.
That's right.
What does it all mean? Who is Aldona? Where were you born? Why do you write?
Yeah, thank you very much for question. Actually, I was born in Riga, in Latvia, in Lithuanian parents. Just was life, life in Soviet Union, and we moved everywhere. You know, my grandparents couldn't come back from Russia to Lithuania. Unfortunately, you know, was very difficult time at that time. Yeah. And my parents, they used to live in Latvia, in Riga. I was born there. Then when I was 17 years old, my parents moved to Lithuania. Already was too easy. We always dreamed about Lithuania, and we moved to Lithuania. I used to work a nurse, actually, as I'm a nurse already 43 years. 43 years as a nurse. Yeah, I used to work in Lithuania. In 2005, I came to UK. I used to work first year. I had contract as care assistant because I didn't have PIN number license, nurse's license, and I sorted out. It's everything, and in 2006 I start to work as a nurse, and since 2006 I'm a nurse in UK. So I'm very proud of my profession. I'm really proud. I love my profession. Yeah. And how I start to writing. Yes, I'm a nurse and writer. That's very maybe strange, but maybe not. People write. Yeah, people can write any profession. I was chairperson of Lithuanian community in Wolverhampton. And first my book, it was about Lithuanian community in West Midlands who came after Second World War to UK, how they came. It's all stories. I met people who came in that time. It was so interesting. I was so excited to write this book. And this book, it was Project Heritage Fund. They gave me funding, and I wrote this book. It was really interesting. I wrote about 3 generations. It's people who came in 1947, other generations, them children, and third generation, it's you migrants. It's we who came to UK after Lithuania become independent. And the next book, of course, it was about my work, because I'm very proud. I want to share my experience. I want to share my knowledge. I want to share people's stories, everything. And it's called Nurse Give Me a Pill for Death. These words is of my one patient. And these words, when she said me this, it came through my heart, straight away through my heart, and I decided to write a book. I didn't know how I will write, but I decided, and I've done it. And about my writing, I just want to read from one my book. It's How to Be an Angel. What moved me to write books is the desire to help people see their situation in a new light and find a way out of difficult circumstances. Of course, personal development is the basis for everything. I have always been interested in how the mind works. I believe in human genius and think we are able to do much more than we think we can. It's just, I share my words to world. I would like uh, to share my stories. Maybe somebody waiting for my stories, or stories, my friends, my patients. It's really interesting stories. There is a really interesting experience, and I think I think it will be interesting to read somebody, and I really have readers who read my books just and thanks and tell thank you for this what I've done. So David, I would like to ask now you, if you don't mind, has it been easy to bridge your duties as an old Catholic priest and the demands of poetry and theatre?
Well, let me say one thing. I think you're a wonderful person. I think you're an archetype. It's a very old image, the idea of the nurse, the midwife, the writer. I think in North Europe, I mean, I count Britain as North Europe. That's an old, ancient, venerable, respected image. So I think you fit that very, very easily. You know, that are you just, I don't know what just would mean. Are you just a nurse that writes? I think yes, but more, much more than that. You know, there's an archetype at work there that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, regarding myself, excuse me, people forget there's more than one type of Catholicism. There are many types. And I don't mean churches that don't recognize each other. If I go to Rome, I am called Father because Catholicism started in three places. It didn't just start in Rome. It started in Rome, it started in Alexandria, and it started in Antioch. Now, I'm not one of the people that comes from one of those other Catholic streams, although they recognize each other, they always have done. And they're actually quite different. The way they practice Catholicism is actually very different. For instance, in the Eastern stream, let's call it that for the time being, there is nothing unusual in priests getting married. In fact, they think it's odd if they don't get married. You know, for me, I think if we look at the modern world, that's much more productive than the way the Romans are doing it at the moment. I think it's a great shame they have this trouble when, I mean, look at the Orthodox Church. The priests get married, but it's the monks who become bishops. I think that's incredibly practical. You know, it's incredibly forward thinking. I'm what they call an old Catholic, which is actually a group that sort of separated itself from Rome, sort of. I mean, we're still recognized, but we're what they say is not in full communion. We have certain problems with what they're saying. About 200 years ago, as a group, we all said we don't like the idea of papal infallibility. We don't like the idea that somebody says they can speak for God. Nobody can speak for God. Jesus Christ, nobody else. Right? I actually quite like the idea of the assumption of the Virgin Mary, but they didn't like back then the idea that the Virgin Mary was taken body and soul into heaven, because the old Catholics, we're liberals, weirdly. They would say, well, but it's not just her, you know, this wonder, our Madonna, our Blessed Lady, but it's not just her, because it says in Scripture, we all will. One day we will all be given that blessing because we're one human family. We're all together. God, Christ, the sovereign, will come back and bless all of us in this wonderful way. And so we didn't like the idea that sort of class privilege was creeping into theology. That made us very uncomfortable. We didn't like that. I don't like that. So I'm proudly old Catholic. With me, it fits quite easily into being a poet and theatrical. It doesn't with some people. I mean, most old Catholics tend to have other jobs as well. They have a day job. They're busy bees. We are all busy bees. There's nothing unusual in Britain in a priest being a poet, and actually not too much unusual in a priest being a theatrical. There's a long tradition of that in this part of the world. So obviously there can be practical problems sometimes. You know, I mean, I mean, at the moment I've got a new play that's going to be produced. It's going to be staged in August, and you know, I can barely think. Oh my God, you know, I'm just worried about that all the time at the moment. And does that interfere with my work as a priest? No, but it's on my mind. You know, so you know, you just do what anyone else does. You do what nurses do. You do what doctors do. You make sure you divide your time between these different things to do justice to all of them. So no, I won't say there's a problem, and certainly the fact there's a tradition in Britain of those things helps me a great deal. I mean, I think there is in Poland, curiously, the Polish priests. I mean, they can be very stern, but I notice that they've got, you know, the idea of the Polish priest was also a school teacher. The Polish priest, who again is also a medic. I notice that's with them as well. I think it's exciting for church people to have these other interests in their life, you know, these other vocations, because it makes everything come alive. You're meeting lots of people, again, in lots of different worlds. It's exciting and it's vibrant. And, you know, it really gets the juices going. I think that's good. Now, I want to throw something back at you. I'm going to read you now. I think I can remember this one. The first poem I ever wrote, which is called Miranda. I am obsessed with Shakespeare. You can't really be a British poet and ignore Shakespeare. The man was amazing. He was a poor man, self-educated, who needed the aristocracy to back him up without the Earl of Southampton, I think it was. I don't think he'd have got too far in life. A busy theatrical, a busy playwright, a director, a producer, a guy on fire, you know. So did he write all of the plays? You know, that's not necessarily the interesting question. The interesting question is they're astonishing to this day and they're beautiful. So this was about a character called Miranda in his last play, the last play he wrote on his own, but that can be argued very clearly, I think, called The Tempest, which is an incredible play, a defense of free thinking. And I'll read it to you now. I'll remember it now, recite it to you now because it's very brief. Miranda. I love you, Holy Virgin, with the soul that you have molded, lovely as a rosebud, to the silver moon unfolded. I love you, Holy Virgin. I love you, Queen of Heaven, with the body you have fashioned, twisted in your service by sacred sighs, of divine passion. I love you, Queen of Heaven. I love you, aged mother, with the mind that you have hardened, deep as dark obsidian, reflecting black thoughts yet unpardoned. I love you, aged mother. I love you, I praise you, I abase myself before you, and with golden songs adore you, my holy whore of heaven. And that was the first poem that I regard as a proper poem, and that's in my first book, my first collection, Caliban's Redemption. How are we doing for time, Aldona?
Sorry?
How are we doing for time? We okay?
We're okay, yeah, time is all right. Yeah, we still we still here.
Well, I hope you liked that. I mean, it was a poem praising women. I mean, my new play, Women in Mayhem, I don't want to say too much about it. I think women are wonderful. I think women are wonderful. You know, as an LGBTQIA plus activist, I think women are wonderful. You know, politics and society needs to balance itself out. I can't see why women weren't equal throughout history. You know what I mean? None of us would be here if it wasn't for women. So I can't see that at all. But, you know, I think there's a magic when women are telling their stories. I think there's a magic when women in particular are saying, you know, this is me, this is my experience, this is my witness. I think there's something magical to that. Anyway, that was the first poem praising a woman, a girl, of course, on a magical island, Miranda, who has not seen. So she's a young innocent in a village, in other words, who hasn't really seen the world and is looking forward to seeing the world, you know, in many ways like yourself, whereas Women in Mayhem, my play, is women being angry. So, as I say, curiously, I write a lot about women. Or maybe not curiously. Anyway, I think you've got another question for me.
Yeah. So I think your work largely rejects tradition, and as you told already, and your authorship is rapidly moving away from solutions into absurdity and false. Would this be fair comments or not?
Actually, I think that's a very good question. Oh, I must admit, I mean, let's look at what's happening around us at the moment. Obviously, we're not dragging this show into politics. We're not doing that. This is a show about literature.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a wonderful show. There aren't enough shows on literature, and literature is magical. No matter what it is, a little poem from somebody's old auntie, a huge novel by somebody's uncle, it's all magical, all of it. Everyone needs to find their voice. It's magical. But let's look at what's happening around us at the minute. I won't name names and I won't point fingers at countries. For one simple reason, I'm a lifelong pacifist. I don't see how anybody else being killed anywhere else will help anybody. I don't see that. And I'm not going into the rights and wrongs of things, because we can all argue about that. What I'm saying is it's a tragedy that these conflicts are happening at all. One in East, you know, one towards the east of Europe, and of course, one in the Middle East, a tragedy. Whether people want to admit it or not, there are rights and wrongs on both sides. And the fact we're not even, we're all human, the fact we're not sitting down and talking about these things rationally is a great sadness to me personally. Because if we don't do that, what hope is there? You know, and there is hope. Every child that's born into the world means there's new hope. You know, we've got to remember that it's not just darkness around us, but for me personally, I mean, I've never really focused on rationality in my writings. You know, I've always looked at the marvelous, I've always looked at the spectacular, because those are things that make us human as well. And I think enough people are looking at rational description. I mean, that's what academics do, and some of them do it extremely well. Some of them don't, but some do. For me, yes, I think over the last, dare I say, 15 years, 20 years, I felt myself being much more influenced by, again, another British tradition in writing, the tradition of the jester, the tradition of the fool, the holy fool, the tradition of nonsense. Edward Lear, as an example, The Owl and the Pussycat, all of that sort of stuff. Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. That is nonsense. It fits into what they call the nonsense genre. But people are very unwise if they think that means silly, or they think it means unintelligent, or they think it means it's got nothing to say. If anything, it can say things which other people cannot say. It can say things in a position of safety. It can say things because you said, look, I know everything's tragic, but I'm going to say things about all of us, not just one group, about all of us. And maybe we can remember how human we are if we do that. So certainly, I mean, on an academic level, I hear the University of South Wales is going to ask me to work with them to award me a PhD by portfolio, which is very exciting. They like the poetry I've done. They like the plays I've done. So that's exciting. I explained to them recently, you do know a lot of it's nonsense. And that was very exciting too, because no one's looking at nonsense now. So, and of course, that ties in with postmodernism, which is very serious. Again, irony about irony. The postmodernists turn up and they say, well, look, you know, all of these advances in science, all of these advances in society, they're all wonderful, they're all interesting, but does it mean anything? You know, if we've got another person on the moon, on Mars, does it mean anything? Is human life getting better because of that? And the answer is no, it's not. So why isn't it? So the postmodernists are these people, the scholars of a very great skill and insight, are saying, you know, there's no point just continuing to advance and progress, because a lot of the time it's not about advancing and it's not about progressing. It's just money and it's just disbelief and it's just all those things that separate us as people. And really, that's not as good as we think it is. So yes, Aldona, your question rather hit the nail on the head. I've drifted in that direction, not because I want to go quiet, but because I want to say even more. I want to say there are things that really do make us human and valuable to each other. And a lot of the time that comes from faith, the faith in healing. I know it's good to work as a nurse, to work as a doctor. I know it's good to make people healthy again. The faith in words and scriptures and ideas of the divine, you know, faith in ourselves, faith in the world. So all of those things are important. Most of the modernists would have trouble in saying what I've just said, but the postmodernists don't. And I think the best medium for me at the moment is certainly nonsense and fun. Nothing wrong with a bit of fun, and saying things that can't really be said in any other way. I mean, the idea of women in mayhem, a very great European dramaturg, Reinhard Ohr, an Austrian, professor of this, professor of that. He's written the afterword of my book, the play, and I'm very honored by what he said. I mean, he's a very great man. He says, you know, what David is getting is purgatory. He says mayhem, but it's purgatory. And maybe he's got a point there. Maybe he's got a point. The idea, however, is it's lots of women on stage in different worlds, in different settings, but with lots of fun. With lots of fun. I mean, there's a character in the play called the dancing pilot, who's a bit like Virgil leading the audience. Dante's the audience, but he's Virgil leading them through these different worlds. And I don't want to say more, apart from tickets are available for a preview in May, and the staging is in August. My wonderful partner and I will be down there in August to see what they've done with my work. I hate actors. I think everybody knows that. So we'll see what they've done with my work. And that's it. Yes, it's very fair. It doesn't mean I've given up reason. It doesn't mean I've given up hope. It doesn't mean that I don't think human beings can live together anymore. I think all those things are 100%. But I think unless you're writing biographical stories, unless you're writing about something like healing. I mean, what would a clergyman do nowadays? Maybe he'd do what I've started to do and look at the rebirth of faith and the rebirth of Christianity and the rebirth of optimism. That's what I think a clergyman would do now, and not worry so much about progress, but worry about those things. Does that answer the question, Aldona?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, you do. Yeah, thank you very much, David. I would like to read something here as a nurse. I would like to read from my new book, Nurse Stories. This book, I'm very proud that this book was on book fair in London and in Paris, and in Tunis will be on 29th of April. Yeah, and a little bit as a nurse is simply to be near them. It's not so important what exactly you are doing, reading, singing, or whatever. The most important thing is simply to be near them. Soon you will realize this closeness is comforting both to them and to you. Maybe it's even more of comfort to you than to the patient. The ill person feels good just because they can hear a dear one's voice and see that one around them. Often a nurse is actually the nearest and dearest person to a patient. Actually, I write not only about nursing, and in this book is not only about nursing or my, yes, it's about nursing, it's some stories of my patients, and here is my stories, my own stories from my youngest age, not very young, but already when I was young person. I used to live in Lithuania, and if you don't mind, I would like to read a little bit from this book. What happens now? At home again in Lithuania after my trip to Almaty. I've been in Almaty as well. Yeah, I think you've been, David, in Almaty. Yeah. I've been as well. It was a long time ago. All the discussions in our republic were about independence. All across the Soviet Union, factories were beginning to shut down. There was a shortage of wool to make ties with. In fact, there was a shortage of everything. My new business ceased to be before I had a chance to make my million. And what I had done, I decided to go to do another one business because the time was quite difficult and I lost my nursing job, and I decided to do business. And I went to Murmansk. Murmansk, it's a very cold city of Russia. It's northwest of Russia, yeah. And it wasn't hard to find people who were growing tulips. For the Women's Day holiday each year, all men buy flower for the women in their lives. Bronya, it's my friend, and I just needed to choose some good ones and keep them fresh until 8 March. We packed the tulips into 8 big boxes and kept them on my balcony, in the hope that they would not bloom too early. But in order to transport them into Russia, we needed to obtain a permit from the epidemiology laboratory. So I wouldn't read all story. If you, dear readers, buy my book, you can read all story. Just I tell how it's happened. It was really big adventure for me, and at the time when I read, it's looks like funny adventure, but at that time was sometimes difficult situations. In the morning of the 11th of March 1919, the Supreme Council of the Lithuania Soviet Socialist Republic announced that the Republic had ceased to be part of the Soviet Union. It was the first Soviet Republic to gain its independence. As it turned out, I had left Soviet Lithuania with some tulips and had come back with some money to the independent country of Lithuania. That was that's what my story. David, would you like to? I would like to ask you to read something else, please, from your.
Well, I notice we're past our time, so I'll read something very small.
Yes.
To
Yeah, our time coming.
as I say, I've never had the chance to talk about this book.
Okay.
By the way, audiences and listenerships, it's great going to pubs, it's great going to clubs, but it's great reading Aldona and me as well. You know, it's not an either or. A weekend, and it's a nice thing to do. Reading is nice. Books are wonderful. Don't ever forget that. It's written from the perspective of Caliban, a character from Shakespeare's Tempest. What I tried to do was capture his thinking. So sometimes it's not my thinking; it's his thinking. Like a script, you know, you're not writing about yourself; you're writing about somebody else, hopefully. So sometimes the poems are very small. I'll just read this one. It's untitled. Sweet moon that shines with the twilight of premature death and exposed bone, learn to smile on my lonely grave. There we are, something medical to finish with, Aldona.
Exactly. All right. Yeah, thank you very much, dearest David, for this interview, and thank you very much, our lovely readers and listeners who watched today our interview. It was really nice to listen, David, and I will publish all works and contact details on descriptions this video. As our time already gone, we have to say all the best and see you next time. Thank you very much, David. Thanks a lot.
The pleasure's mine. The pleasure's mine.
Yeah.